Gentlemen, good morning. Okay, so let's just finish off that piece from the Avas Chesed. Just that last little piece. The Chafetz Chaim is talking to us about the importance of making a gemach and giving out loans, and he laments how people, even people with very small disposable income, fail to use at least a portion of their savings for that purpose. And he concludes by saying, "Va'ayin b'ksubas." He says there's a Gemara in Maseches Ksubas that says, "Melach mamon cheser va'amrilei chesed." He says that the salt of money. In other words, if you want to know how to preserve your money, it's cheser, lose it. Va'amrilei chesed, and some say the word is chesed. They're very connected because one's a resh and one's a dalet. Rod Salomar, what that means is in the Gemara, sheyachzirenu lasos mimenu tzedakah b'chesed. In other words, decrease your cash in your bank by giving it out as loans. And when you do chesed with your money, which will cause a cheser, a shrinkage of money in your bank account, that will preserve your assets. Az yiskayim hamaz. But if you don't do that, then your assets will be like meat that has not been salted, it has not been preserved, which will eventually go bad. Okay? And sadly, this is one of the things that has caused the Jewish people to enter into poverty. Because in prior generations, that most loans that were made to one's fellow Jew were purely for chesed purposes and not for enterprise. So God therefore treated us with chesed, and therefore there were previous times in our lives when the Chafetz Chaim is writing, when things were good, life was good, and the economy was good, and Jews were making good money. However, but today, unfortunately, he says, we're in a sorry financial state, the Jewish people, or it could be he's just talking about Poland in general. I don't know, But as I mentioned in my Pirkei Avos shir this past Shabbos, my Rosh Yeshiva Rav Weinberg used to say, and I saw this in a documentary that I saw about him, he says, anything that happens in life, you have to ask yourself, why is God doing this, right? And you don't necessarily have the correct answer, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't ask the question. I was watching a tape that he had made in the early 90s, like I think 1991, and he was talking about, you have to ask, why is this Iraq war taking place? And what about the economic downturn? That also you have to ask your question. Why is Hashem doing this, right? So, a recession in the world, if there's a recession in the world, then Jews want to be able to help in coming out of it and help ourselves not suffer from the consequences of an upheaval worldwide. We do more chesed. And that's the key to getting out of it a little bit better. Okay, so let us go back to the Likutim that we were in the middle of before we just did that interlude in Chafetz Chaim. Okay, in Bo Lefanav, we're in the Likutim, just going through it. In Bo Lefanav Harbe Anashim, ve'echad mehem tzarach lilvo sach meruba, v'ha'acherim lo yivakshu mimenu kol echad kim davar muat. He says you've got various people who need to borrow money. One person needs to borrow a large amount, and the other people who come to you, each one needs to borrow a small amount, such that so you have a choice. You can either give one big loan, or you can give multiple small loans. Mutav sheyalve l'chol echad sach mu'at milahalvos le'echad sach merubeh. He says it's better to give multiple small loans than one large loan. Because for each one that you're giving a small loan to, you're fulfilling a separate mitzvah aseh. So you're accumulating more mitzvot, the more people that you're able to share your assets with. But that's assuming that each person that's coming to you is equivalent in their priority or their status. In other words, let's say one of the people that comes to you is your brother, right? And he says, I need a loan. And then the other people are strangers. So then your brother would take priority because he's family, even though he needs the big one. He needs the big loan. Okay. Misha who yeah. These are all tzedakah based, the halachas apply pretty much the same way as they do to tzedakah. Yeah. Misha who osek b'Torah, u'ba'echa lilvos mimenu, v'yef shel mitzvah zu leos la'yidei acherim, tzarech levatel milimudo b'shvil mitzvah zu. Someone's in the middle of learning, and someone comes to him and says, excuse me, I really need a favor. I need to borrow some money. If there's no other way to get it to him at the time that he needs it other than interrupting your learning, then you have to interrupt your learning in order to take care of it. So there are times, I assume, when any time someone needs to take a call in the middle of shir, it's because someone needs a chesed from them. Otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed to. Otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed to leave shir. Okay.
Not just to get more mitzvah points, sounds kind of calculating,
Right.
but also to get used to doing that action. So we say that it's like every time you take your
Could
hand
be.
out, so every time you loan money, you're getting used to the fact of saying yes to someone who's asking.
Okay. I mean, you're certainly welcome to look at it that way. I don't think you're right that there is some kind of negative connotation of the idea of calculating. Yeah. But the truth is that that's the halachic system. There is, within the halachic system, you are supposed to make a calculus as to what would be the most, right. So you have to say that the reason why you get more mitzvahs is because you're doing something that is more virtuous. Ultimately, that's the idea. It's not that, one ringy dingy, two ringy dingy, right? It's
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Izzy.
Isn't there also the idea of giving a little bit, a lot of times gets you used to giving?
That's exactly what Paul said. Sorry, the microphone doesn't always pick up what people say in the room. Yeah, it's exactly what Paul said. Okay. Next, lahakdim ani la'asher, you should prioritize the poor over the wealthy in giving loans. V'ish kodem le'isha lahalvos. And furthermore, a man takes priority over a woman. There's a mitzvah to give a man before a woman. But that's only when both of them are not poor people. And certainly if the man is poor and the woman is not poor, the man takes priority. But when the two of them are poor, the woman takes priority over the man. But that's only if the man is a non-relative, just like the woman, right? But if the man is a relative, then he would take priority over a non-relative woman. And the reason, of course, is that you don't want women to be begging or to be going from place to place. I don't know. I just had a situation that I have to look into. I neglected, I got busy and I neglected to look into it earlier in the week. There was a woman who came to shul collecting and I said, where's your petek? Where's your No, the tu'udah, that's the word I was looking for. And she said the Vadat Staka stopped giving tu'udot to women already Purim time. Apparently, there were some shenanigans with women and men trying to exploit them. So that means they stopped giving them tu'udot. And I have to find out what that really means. Because, yeah, how does that help? If a woman, let's say, is a divorcee or a widow, and she needs to support her family, and she has no other means to do so other than, like this woman came from Eretz Yisrael. I don't know what her story was, but I assume there's no man in the picture, right? So how does that help her that she doesn't get it to that? What, just because some man is taking advantage of women? That's not a reason to not give out tu'udot. Yeah, I don't know. I got to figure it out. Okay. If, let's say, by not giving the loan to the man first, the man's life could be placed in danger, then also there's a mitzvah to give the loan to the man first. Now, this is not drama. I mean, this is not melodramatic. This is real life. There are times when someone gets caught up in the mafia and owes them money, and he needs a loan. I know that there was a situation where they were making a collection for a guy. I'm trying to remember. I think it was here in Toronto many years ago. There was a guy who got in trouble with the mafia, and they were making a collection for him. Because really his life was in danger. I'm trying to remember the details of the story, but of course, never do this, fellas. Don't get caught up in the mafia, no matter how desperate you get. Dehu chayav b'chol hamitzvos, ma she'en kein ha'isha dehi petur mimitzvos aseh shehazman grama. And the reason why men take priority is because they have more mitzvahs to do. So if you can save the life of a man before a woman, that's the calculus. Yeah. So, well, okay, but of course, there's what happened to chivalry, right? That's right. Men, women, and children first, right? So obviously there are other factors that you have to take into account. I think he does make reference to Siman Tes Sifkat Nun in the Imrei Yaakov, which we learned a while ago. So I don't remember what it says over there. Imbo lefanav harbe anoshim lilvos ve'en yachol lilavos lekulam makdim hakohen lelevi v'halevi liyisrael v'hayisrael lemamzer. If multiple people need a loan, how do you prioritize? So a Kohen comes before. Kohen is number one in the list. Woohoo! Okay, so and then a Levi takes second priority, and then a Yisrael takes the third priority, and a Yisrael takes priority over a mamzer, someone who. Depends how many you plan on finding. Okay, Bamedvar Mamurim Bisman Shehem Shavin Bechachma. Right? That's all when they're all equal in their level of Torah knowledge. Aval im haya mamzer Talmud Chacham, but if the mamzer is a scholar, Torah scholar, and all the other guys, the Kohen, the Levi, and the Yisrael are just regular guys, says so who kodem lekulam, then he takes priority over all of them. Afilu hechacham tzarech hamos leksus ve'am haaretz lemazon hechacham kodem. And even though we learned before that someone who needs food takes priority as someone who needs clothing, but if the person who needs clothing is a Talmud Chacham, he takes priority over the regular guy who needs food. Ve'eshes chaver kechaver, and the wife of a Talmud Chacham has the same status as the Talmud Chacham himself. V'chol hagadol b'chachma kodem lechavero, and anyone who is greater in wisdom takes priority over the others. Ba'ani me'iro v'talmud chacham me'ir acheres nechleku b'zeh ha'poskim. There's a machlokus in the poskim if there's a poor man from your city and the Talmud Chacham is from another city. Which one takes priority? That's a machlokus. And I guess you'd have the right to go like either opinion. Mi shenitein biyado maman lahalvos osam legamach. Ein lekrove hanosein shum yitaron al ha'acherim. Let's say you're in charge of a gemach. Okay, it's not your money, but you're an executor on a gemach. And one of your relatives comes to you for the loan from the gemach. There is no priority to be given to a relative in that case, because it's not your money. It's community money, right? The kaven shenitain biyado hamos bishvil hamitzvah hu kegabai shezocha bishvil kol ha'ir b'shavas. Since the money was given to you to do the mitzvah on behalf of the community, everyone in the community takes. You're just a gabbai. You're an executor, and it's therefore not. You don't prioritize based on the connection of the people to yourself, but based on the connection of the people to the communal funds. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
would a ger be considered Yisrael in the case of prioritizing?
I believe so. I don't see that there's any differentiation made to between a ger and a natural born Jew. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It'd be a higher priority. There's specific criterion.
Right. There's a mitzvah of ahavas hager, of loving the
I
convert,
don't know
but
whether that was the question.
yeah, I don't know. Okay, so let's take a look now at some of the biurim. Okay, yesh la'ayin kesheshcheno bo lilvos mimenu eza ma'achal. Let's ask the following. Let's present the following scenario. Your neighbor comes over to you and says he wants to borrow a cup of sugar. She wants to borrow a cup of sugar. Does it now become an obligation to lend her a cup of sugar, like it is an obligation to lend money? If you don't lend her the cup of sugar, you're in violation of a positive commandment. Or is it just a matter of chesed? And therefore, you just lose the chesed opportunity when you don't lend her the cup of sugar. The Sefer Or Sameach writes, which is an important commentary on the Rambam, he writes that it is not included, lending objects is not included in the mitzvah of giving loans, which is not what we saw in the Likutim the other day. V'chein kasaf b'panim yafos parshas Mishpatim ala pasuk in kesef talvez hami u'v'shut Imrei yosher gam be'avas chesed kasef da'ani shebalishon limeno eze kli hanachatz lo yesh alav chiyuv mitzad hadin lahashilo. He says the Chafetz Chaim also writes that if an ani comes to you to borrow a certain object, you have a mitzvah to lend it to him. Umashma b'nesiv hachesed sham dehu mitam chiyuv tzedakah ayin sham u'hu rak laniyim bulvad. He says, and it sounds like from his language in his commentary that it's only because of the mitzvah of tzedakah that you should lend a poor person an object. Ulam ze omer b'she'ei level b'halva av she'eno mamon efshar du nichal b'mitzvah salva. But that's only when it comes to borrowing an object that you're not going to be consuming, right? But let's say someone wants to borrow from you a cup of sugar that they're going to be consuming and they'll be replacing with other sugar. So that's like borrowing cash. He says, Efshar du nichlal b'mitzvah salva. That could be included in the mitzvah of lending. Chein mashma mishut chaim shol d'svila v'gabi shvius d'meshamet salvas ma'achal ayin sham. He writes that just like Shemitah cancels loans of cash, Shemitah cancels loans of objects. So if your neighbor comes and wants to borrow a cup of sugar, and it's Erev Rosh Hashanah, and you didn't do a prus bowl, she could say, I don't have to pay you back the cup of sugar. But he says, and that's certainly the inference from the Rav Shulchan Aruch's language also, because what did he write in the Sograim? What did he write in the parentheses? Let's see. He has a couple of things in parentheses, but I don't know what he was referring to specifically. But anyway, he says, but that's he's differentiating between cash and other consumable goods. He says, so, and therefore, basically, he wants to argue, shekasav madua ein chiyav lahashalo kli mishum shu miskalkel b'tashmisho v'lo hizhira Torah ela b'halva she'en bo pseida ayin sham. He says the Torah doesn't obligate you to lend something, an object that will, which will wear down over the course of time. That you're not obligated to as far as the mitzvah of loans, because loans are things that you get back exactly what you lent out. Based on that reason, lending a cup of sugar should be no different from lending cash. So, but my question really is not, is lending a cup of sugar, is it equivalent to lending cash? My question is, my neighbor comes to my door. She wants to borrow a cup of sugar. The makolet, or the mini mart, right, or Sobeys, is just down, it's just 2 blocks away. It's open. She could just as easily get in her car, run down to Sobeys, buy a bag of sugar, and do whatever she wants, right? So why is she coming to me? It's more convenient, and all she needs is a cup. She doesn't need a whole bag. So, is there an obligation? In other words, it's not like a person who needs a loan doesn't have anywhere else to turn to get cash, right? This is a person who clearly could get the bag of sugar from the market, just as from a convenience point of view. So in that situation, do I have the same mitzvahs aseh, mitzvah from the Torah, to lend her a cup of sugar? B'hinei le'inyan halvas mos, kisheyesh lechavero mos b'kiruv makom u'mit'atzel le'lech l'sham, mistaver b'pashtus de'eno oiver. So let's talk about loans for a second. Guy comes to me for a loan, and he says to me, I need some cash to cover my expenses. Now, I know this guy comes from a wealthy mishpat. He's got a trust fund, and he's got plenty of money in the bank. I know he's got lots of money in the bank. So, and I ask him, I say, why don't you just go to your bank account? You come from a family of means. And he tells me, I know, but I'd have to wait till the bank opens, and I don't want to go all the way to the bank today. So if you can give me $100 in cash, I'd appreciate it. So if I refuse him, have I violated the mitzvah of lending people money? If his whole reason for wanting the money from me, instead of going and getting it from his own account, is a convenience issue, but not the person who's truly in need. That's really what that's the sugar case. But if a person has the means, but he doesn't want to touch his money, he wants to rather take money from others, you don't have to listen to him. That's talking about Hilchos tzedakah. In the Gemara's case, there's some people who are sick, right? There's some people who come for tzedakah when they have plenty of money, but they have this psychosis that I can't touch that money. I need that money for my retirement, right? And therefore, what do? They will starve and live in squalor, and will not touch the money that's in their bank. So does the community have an obligation to take care of that person and to provide him with Tomchei Shabbos and stuff like that? You may think that's a crazy case, but it's not. It actually does happen. There have been cases like that. And that's why, by the way, what about a person who says, I can't afford the tuition for my kid's education, and he wants to take a subsidy which comes from community funds? It's not like the school says, okay, we won't charge you, no loss. They still have to pay the teachers. They still have overhead, so that that money's got to come from some community funds, right? So that's why a school does have a right to turn someone away who refuses, let's say, to provide a financial statement, because we need to know. Like, if you have savings and in those savings you have funds to cover your children's tuition, but you don't want to touch that. That's that's your nest egg, that's your this, it's your that. Well, sorry. If everyone's entitled to do with their money what they wish, but a school doesn't have to support your children with community funds just because you don't want to touch your savings, right? So this is the conflict.
Depriving others for more.
Not only that, right? But tzedakah is meant for poor people. Tzedakah is not meant for you don't, right? So therefore, benifsak b'shulchan aruch, and this is a halacha psuka in Shulchan Aruch. You're talking about the grandparents of the children. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 So yeah. Right. So the truth of the matter is that you have to sometimes look at it. Moshe is asking the question, what if the grandparents of the kids who are in school are very wealthy? The kids are not wealthy. They have a controlled income from the parents, which is a terrible situation to be in. It's totally emasculating and inhibiting, right? You never want to, that's the liability of growing up in a wealthy family, is that it completely strips the individual of that sense of ambition and independence. But let's let's put that aside for a second. So the question is, a parent comes to Moish, who sits on the tuition subsidy committee, and says, look, my parents only give me $75,000 a year. I barely have enough to get by. Well, then we say to him, well, then why are you going to the Pesach program to Florida every year? And then you're going to Eretz Yisrael with the Mishpacha. You're driving Suburbans. And he legitimately says, you're right. Everything was given to me by my parents. They gave me the Suburban. They take us for Pesach to Florida, and they send us to Eretz Yisrael to be together with family for the Simcha. But none of it is my money. It's not mine. It's not like I have the option to say, Mom and Dad, I won't join you in Florida for Pesach this year. Could you please use that $5,000 or $10,000, whatever a Pesach program costs per person, and use it to cover my kids' tuition? There is a legitimate argument to be made there. It's not the grandparent's obligation. A grandparent does not have a halachic obligation to educate their grandchild. It's incumbent upon the parents, not upon the grandparents. And yet, okay, so you get to one of those things where the halacha does not address, I don't think the halacha really addresses that exact situation, but obviously there's a travesty going on. That is a travesty. But the question is, how do you address it? And I don't have a simple answer. From a halachic standpoint, there doesn't seem to be a simple open and shut case that you can deny a scholarship to that parent based if they're only making $75,000 a year in reality, because everything else is being given to them. But I don't know how to deal with it. I want to think about it a little bit based on what we're learning. It's a tough situation when it comes to tzedakah. Okay, v'im kein b'pashta suadin le'inin halva, v'im yesh lo ma'os ve'ino rotze li'ishtamish bahem rak mishal acherim, and therefore, if a person has assets, but he doesn't want to touch them, right, for whatever reason, and he'd rather use community funds or someone else's money to be able to get by, even if it's just the loan, ein shum chiyuv lahalvos, so there's no obligation to lend them the money. Ulam im hasagas hamos eino bekiruv makom. However, let's say there's a legitimate reason he can't get to his funds. Let's say they're in a faraway country, or let's say, V'ika tircha meruba mistaber diyesh bo chiyuv. He says, and let's say it would involve a tremendous burden to get to those funds. Or let's say the funds are tied up in a fund that if he were to invade that fund, he would incur substantial penalties. Right. So he says, then it could be that there is an obligation to lend the person money. And it really requires more analysis as to what really the level of a burden needs to be demonstrated when a person has his own fund but doesn't want to invade it. What level of burden has to be reached in order to say, okay, you qualify for a loan according to Allah. So we'll have to hold it here for today. We'll continue Mirz Hashem on Monday. A good Shabbos, everyone, and let me wish you a meaningful Shivas or B'tamas as well. Okay, take care.